Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. I wanted to address the subject, a subject that is very difficult for me to discuss, to be honest, as you probably know, if you've been watching my podcast episodes, the subject of Rafah in Gaza. The bombing campaign in Rafah continues. And Benjamin Netanyahu promises that it will continue even more, even as the U.S. is sending more financial and military aid to the Israeli government. The right-wing Israeli government. It is so sad. The tragic suffering of people, which is totally needless. It simply does not need to happen. A powerful first world country armed with nuclear weapons, which fortunately it has not, at least not yet, used, is attacking a helpless population of people in a prison camp. How, I wonder sometimes, could Israel do this? As I've said before, and I'm not the only one, how could a country which was founded based upon the Holocaust of the 20th century, there would be no Israel, at least no Israel in Palestine, were it not for the Holocaust of the 20th century. So how could a country like that be the perpetrators of a new Holocaust, the Holocaust of the 21st century? I don't know. I wish I could answer that question. I would like to think that people, no matter what their differences of opinion is, no matter how they view different populations, no matter their positions on politics, would have some level of compassion, some concern for people that are literally supposed to be protected by them, as the Gazans have only Israel to supposedly protect them. And now, instead of protecting the Gazans, the Likud government, the Israeli Defense Forces, are bombing them, killing them. I heard for a long time about the supposed prison camp that was being built for them in Egypt, across the transcontinental divide, from Asia into Africa. I have not heard about that in a while. Maybe there will be such a place. Maybe there won't. The way it looks right now, to me, I don't see how those people, those poor people in Rafah, can survive long enough to wait to be transferred into Egypt. Why are no more countries, Arab Gulf countries, protesting? There have been some protests. There is massive anger at Israel. Obviously, at least as I see it, the reason for the Israeli war on Iran is because, first, Israel looked at its own population and saw that the vast majority of its citizens supported the war on Gaza. Second, Israel looked outside of its country and saw the overwhelming disapproval for that same war. And then I suppose Israel thought to itself, well, with our own citizens, we have nothing to worry about. Our own citizens are almost overwhelmingly in support of our actions in Gaza. And when it comes to the rest of the world, first, who cares? And second, how much lower can you go? Public opinion against Israel is literally at an all-time low. There used to be considerable sympathy for Israel, especially when Israel was attacked by Hamas or Hezbollah. That sympathy is gone. There is no more sympathy among average people around the world. But when it comes to political leaders, where are they? Where are you, France? Where are you, United Kingdom? Where are you, Germany? I don't know. I look around and I see nobody protesting against this horrendous activity that is taking place in Rafah. It is a slaughter. I don't know any other word for it. It is a slaughter. It's different than the German Holocaust against the Jews. That was not carried out in the same way. There, Jews and other people, including gypsies, were placed into concentration camps. They were then transferred from those concentration camps into gas chambers, then into ovens. I guess it was a 3-stage process. That process is not happening in Gaza. It is just a slaughter. And Israel has no accountability. Why? The UN was started largely inspired by the Holocaust. Of course, there was a previous attempt to start a similar world body, the League of Nations, that failed because the US would not join it. But the United Nations was a different story. It started because of the Holocaust. People were so overwhelmed, so depressed by what the Nazis had done to the Jews, to the Gypsies, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and more, that the only real decision that they could make would be to start the United Nations, and especially the UN Security Council. But in that Security Council, the US is one of several nations which has a veto. Not all nations have it, only some. And the US regularly vetoes resolutions which have condemned Israel, especially for its treatment of the Palestinians. And so there is nothing that the UN can do. As far as I am concerned, they might as well close up shop today. Why are they even there? It's a pretty building. Is that why they're there? I was born in Manhattan, the location of the UN, and I have been to the UN and driven by it many more times. It is right on the river, a very attractive building, very, very attractive. Is that why the UN is there? Because it's pretty? Because of its attractiveness? It's not fulfilling any function. The UN has no executive authority. The UN can warn and warn and warn, but that's all it can do. There is no UN army, UN police force with any authority to go in to Israel or into Gaza and stop the slaughter. And so the UN, to me, is simply a waste of space. Why not tear it down and build condos? Why not? What is the point of it? Now, I realize that there are some UN agencies like UNESCO which do some good. Okay, I will give you that. I will give you that UNESCO and some other agencies of the UN do some good. Some good. But if the UN cannot stop the Holocaust of the 21st century, what good is it? So, me, if there were a vote, a public vote, where the citizens of all countries that are member nations of the UN could vote in as to whether the UN should be continued, I would vote against it. I would think to myself, there is no point. And even if my vote were only seen as a protest vote, okay, so it's a protest vote. So what? Protest votes don't do much good. They don't help the people who are the victims of oppression, but at least they make a point. So I would favor that kind of election, that kind of vote. And I would literally vote against the continuance of the UN. It serves literally no function in the world that is needed in 2024. And that function is to end the war against Gaza, and especially now Rafah, and to find out why the hell haven't those Gazans been transferred to Egypt? Now, obviously, that's not a good plan. That's cultural genocide. That's taking an indigenous population, and the Gazans are indigenous to Gaza. The Israelis are not indigenous to Israel. So taking an indigenous population, the Gazans, and moving them to another country, to another continent. I am not in favor of that. But I would much rather see it than see the continuing slaughter of the Gazans now in Rafah. So I suppose I am at my breaking point. Not literally. I mean, I do fine. Most of the time, I don't think about Gaza. Maybe I should. I have a lot of other things to occupy my time. I go out, I eat in restaurants, I shop. It's warm here almost year round. So I have nothing to worry about. And the fact that I am upset, who cares that I am upset? Who cares? I don't care. I don't care. I care about the Gazans. And pretty soon, if this continues, it seems to me that there will be no more Gazans. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way it looks. Let me turn now to my use of dialectical metarealism in this case. One of the 5 components of dialectical metarealism is Antifa dialectical metarealism, or the Antifa dialectical metarealist collective. The Antifa dialectical metarealist collective. Antifa is anti-fascism. So I decided that I would first pronounce it in the Trump way, basically to show how Antifa too has become basically useless. Trump has, of course, condemned it, has not pronounced it correctly, has pronounced it as Antifa. My feeling now, as Antifa, as someone who identifies with Antifa, is that it might as well be called Antifa, a word which makes no sense. Antifa is an acronym. Antifa, or Antifa, is nothing. I have not seen any protests by my comrades who identify with Antifa against the slaughter in Gaza. And I wonder why. Isn't Antifa supposed to oppose authoritarianism and fascism? Isn't that the basic idea behind it? So why is the fascism, which is now resulting in the killing of so many innocents, including babies in incubators, not being challenged by Antifa or Antifa? Black Lives Matter, BLM, every time, or almost every time, that a Black person was killed by the police and it made the news, BLM would be out in full force. I have not seen BLM in a long time. Have killings by police of unarmed people of color stopped? No, they haven't stopped. What has stopped is the demonstrations. So it appears to me as though we have entered into a time of apathy. Maybe the reason is that many people feel overwhelmed. There are so many problems in the world today, so many problems, whether it's Gaza, whether it is Ukraine, whether it is Iran, or some other part of the world, that people who call themselves Antifa, like me, might as well be Antifa. I wish that BLM were more active. I consider myself to be a part of BLM. As you know, if you've been watching my podcasts, as an Ashkenazi Jew, I regard myself as a person of color. Not a black person, but BLM has always been focused on people of color in general. And so I feel that I can, if I want to, and I do, identify with BLM. It is the reason I began identifying with Antifa. And yet I look around and do not see Antifa or people who call themselves Antifa doing anything. Even I am not doing really anything. I'm making these podcasts as a type of conscientization, critical conscience, and consciousness raising. But so what? My podcasts have hardly any audience. So really, I am not doing much good either. I have no right to criticize others when my criticism really should be turned primarily to myself. And I do criticize myself every day. The difficulty I have is I don't know what to do, or maybe I don't know what else to do. Maybe there is something, but if there is, I don't know. How can I stop the war, the terrorist campaign against Gaza? The obvious answer is I can't. No one can, except the Israeli government. And it has shown no inkling of going in that direction. So I mourn. I mourn, as I think we all should mourn all the time, or at least whenever we think of it. We should mourn for the Gazans, for the Gazan children and the Gazan babies that are being killed by the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. Maybe mourning is the best that we can do. We are, in my view, seeing the final breaths of the capitalist world system. I do not think it has that much more time. The dialectic is a real force of nature. It is a causal principle built into nature itself, including built into ourselves and our own hearts. And eventually, but obviously I don't know why, and neither can anyone, the dialectic will bring this whole event to an end. And with it, the people who are perpetrating it. So I'm sorry if I have offended anyone. I have tried to stay afield from doing this kind of podcast in recent weeks for two reasons. One, because I don't think it does any good. And second, because it upsets me. So if somebody can show me what good I have done, what accomplishments I have made, then please do. Please do. Please tell me, because I do not see any. I want to continue doing this podcast, including the present episode. But if I feel as though this podcast is useless, that my conscientization is totally ineffective, then again, what is the point? But turning back to Antifa or Antifa, turning back to Antifa, a part of dialectical meta-realism, I realize that dialectical meta-realism, which is primarily based on critical realism, and then secondarily on Maoism, third worldism, Antifa, and other perspectives, is only my own perspective. You may have your own. Good. Good. If your perspective is one which can be applied to eliminate the crisis in Gaza and the crisis in Iran, then please use it. Please do your own podcasts. Please. We need more, not less. A lot more, not less. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.